All right, so today's lesson is solving quadratics by square roots. So quadratic equations of this form, and this form would be there is no linear term. Bx would be a linear term. There's just x squared and a number. In this form, we're going to solve it by isolating the x squared and then square rooting both sides. So in this case, notice there's no middle term, no x term, just x squared and a number. We're going to add 49, and then we're going to square root. So it's important to know to inverse a square, it's square root that inverses it. Like adding and subtracting, they reverse. Multiplying and dividing, right? They're connected because they're the inverses of each other. Squaring and square root, they undo each other. And then what number times itself is 49. Now here's an important point to remember, and it's going to be hard at first. The answer could be either positive or negative. Now why is that? Why isn't it just positive 7? And that's because of the square. If I take positive 7 and I square it, 7 times 7 is 49. It's a good answer. But negative 7, if I do the same thing and square it, what's negative times negative? You get the same answer. There are two numbers that give you the same answer. So positive 7 and negative 7 both give you 49. They need to be included, both of them. All right, here we go. So I want to isolate the x squared. So I'm going to add 16 to the other side, and then I'm going to square root. I'm going to remember the answer could be positive or negative, and then what number times itself is 16. I'm going to add 100. I'm going to square root. When I solve a quadratic, the answer can be positive or negative. What number times itself is 100? Now, be careful here. When I subtract 25 and square root, there is no real answer here. So, why did I write that down? That's because there is no number times itself that can be negative. So when you take the square root of a negative number, it's actually what's called imaginary. Totally different lesson. What we're doing is only understanding the real answers, not imaginary. So the square root of a negative number, we write down no real solution or no real answer. There you go. Number 4, subtract 7. So 88, take away 7, then square root. Now notice in this case, we're taking the square root of a positive number. What number times itself is 81? Make sure it's positive and negative. Number 5, add 5 to both sides. Negative 4 plus 5 is 1, square root, and the answer is positive or negative 1. Divide by 6, and then square root. So we're trying to get x squared by itself. We're remembering the answer could be positive or negative, and there's our answer. So again, x squared by itself. Divide by negative 2, and negative divided by negative is positive, and then square root. Positive or negative, and the number times itself, 49 is 7. Oh, a little challenge here, a fraction. I like that. We do the reciprocal when we do this. So to both sides, we're going to do the reciprocal. So when we do the reciprocal, the 3's and 4's cross out. That's x squared. On this side, we have two choices. We can multiply and then divide, or we can divide and then multiply. If I multiply first, the number's going to get quite large. I might have to do long division with 3. I don't want to do that. I want to divide first. So 3 goes into 48 16 times. And then 16 times 4 is 64. It's still a large number, but it's easier to divide first and then multiply. Square root, and the answer is positive or negative, and it's 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. Number 9, isolate the x squared. Add 108, and then divide by 3. I'll help you. 3 goes in there. Can I help you? How many times does 3 go in there? Goes in there 3, 18, 6, 36. That took too long. Square root, plus or minus 6. All right, add 45, divide by 5, and then 45 divided by 5 is 9, and then square root, and you have your answer. Positive or negative? Turn the page. Number 11. So we're going to subtract 66. And then I'm going to divide by 7. But what's going to happen here is you're going to end up with a negative number. In the square root of the negative number, there is no real solution or no real answer. Either word works, but there's nothing there because the square root of a negative number. Here, subtract 3. Now, the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. These cross out, so it's just x squared, and then double 72. Now square root, and the answer is positive or negative. And what number times itself is 144? All right, these are going to be some fractions. It's okay. Add 16 to the other side, divide by 9. When I square root a fraction, it could be positive or negative. You just have to square root the top and then square root the bottom separately. So what number times itself is 16? What number times itself is 9? And you did it. No big deal. All right, number 14, subtract 10. And then divide by 25. Remember, when it's a fraction, it's no big deal. So when I square root, I know the answer is positive or negative. You just square root the top. What number times itself is 36? Square root the bottom. What number times itself is 25? And you have your answer. Number 15. We're going to have to combine like terms here. So I'm going to subtract x squared, but I'm also going to add 1 to both sides. So I'm going to rearrange this. So that's 4x squared is equal to 1. So these cross out, this crosses out. 5 take away 1, and then plus 1. Now we're set up. Divide by 4, and we're taking the square root of a fraction now. So we know the answer is positive or negative. And when I square root a fraction, it's no big deal. So the top, what number times itself is 1? What number times itself is 4? And you got positive or negative 1/2. All right, number 16. Add 34. Divide by 16. And then square root. So, square root of 49, 7, square root of 16, 4, and you have your answer. Oh, here we go. Irrational solutions. Let's just figure out what that means. So an irrational means a real number you can only estimate. We're going to stick with that. A real number that you can only estimate. Some people talk about integers where you can write it as a fraction where the top and bottom are integers. That's kind of confusing. But if I understand it's a real number and you can only estimate it, that's what an irrational number is. Might be helpful. I'm going to add 3. Now, what happens if I don't have a number? So what number times itself is 3? I don't have it. There is no number times itself that's 3. I can only estimate what that number is. It's like 1.56 something. But I can only estimate it. If you type that in a calculator, it's a decimal that goes on forever. But I don't have that number. It's real, but I don't know the exact value. Here. And we're not going to simplify these right now. So we're going to square root and make sure the answer is positive or negative. Again, we're going to subtract 8. So 56 take away 8. What is that? That's not 50 anymore. It's 48. We're going to square root, and we're just going to leave the answer as the square root of 48. I'm saying that because there is a skill to simplify a radical, a square root, but that our lesson is not on that right now. So I don't want us to focus on that. But to know there is no number times itself that's 48, that makes it irrational. That's the important part of the lesson. All right, add 16. Can I add this? So that's 75. Square root it. There is no number times itself that's 75, so we're just going to leave it as that. Add 126. Divide by 2. If you want to know what half of this is, what's half of 12? And what's half of 6? That gives you a good way to figure it out. Square root. There is no number times itself that's root So you can only leave it as a square root. Here, I'm going to subtract 8. I didn't know what direction I wanted to go there. That's negative 30. And then divide by negative 3. Now a negative divided by a negative is positive. So when you square root, you are square rooting a positive number. The square root of 10, there is no number times itself that equals 10. Here, we're going to add 10. When I divide by negative 1, though, I get x squared is equal to negative 28. So when you have the square root of a negative number, you write down no real solution or no real answer, and it's done. All right, let's finish this. Add 11. And then a fraction, we're going to do the reciprocal, which means we're going to take 1/2 and flip it around. So it's 2 over 1. And we're going to do both sides. So 36 times 2, and then square root. There is no number times itself. That's 72, so we're just going to leave it. So these are irrational answers because there's no number times itself that equals it. So we can only estimate it, but it's still a real number that we need to figure out. Now, if it's a square root of a negative number, it's still no real solution. All right, there's your lesson. Mr. G Math, over and out. Till next time.